You know, just about every topic, Mr. Quaranta, that I've been discussing when it comes to Wall Street, the economy, the Trump administration, I'm like, I could have somebody from Secure Money Advisors as a incredible guest to talk about it. I don't think I've ever seen so many things in the financial world be heading in my opinion, for now, the right direction as we have in the last 2 weeks. It's been a very unique and interesting and historic time that we're living in right now.
Fast paced.
Oh,
Fast paced. It's like drinking from a fire hose, man.
that's a great analogy.
Right?
Yeah.
I wonder how many of those Sharpies he's worn out.
Unbelievable. But he can actually make them legible. That's how good he is.
Yeah, I know. You watch him and he gets it right every single time.
Anyway, welcome everyone to another episode of On the Money with Secure Money. Of course, I'm your host with this man, Brian Quaranta, Rob Pratte, and joining me today, as always, we're going to be talking about securing your financial future. So, without further ado, to kind of fill you in what we're going to be doing, the host of Secure Money Advisors On the Money, the man with the plan, Mr. Brian Quaranta.
Thank you. Well, yeah, we got a lot to cover today. I want to talk a little bit about, obviously, these tariffs that Trump is imposing. I want to talk a little bit about emergency funds. I think some basic fundamentals in retirement planning tend to be overlooked because they're looked at as being common sense, but it's the little things sometimes that are missed, and it's the little things that become big headaches. And then we're going to talk about some tax strategies, and then I've got some questions from listeners that we're going to wrap up on. So, we've got an action-packed show, Rob.
That's what we do every week.
I know.
I was at the convention center last week, and honestly, I miss being here. You guys really sounded as though you were having a lot of fun with a lot of pertinent information. But I must tell you, throughout the week, you're always on my mind. And I just want to say I was out in Swissville the other night doing a bunch of social media stuff, talking to all these mayors about the U.S. Steel, Nippon Steel deal. And I kept thinking, thank goodness for Brian Quaranta and Secure Money Advisors, because if this thing doesn't go, this is my humble opinion. And all of these people with these 20 years in, and I met a gentleman who's 42 years old, his son's in ninth grade, he plays hockey, he's going to be going to a special school to continue his high school career, to be on this traveling team because he's got that kind of skill set. And this man looked at me, 42 years of age, and he said, everything I have now and in the future is all because of U.S. Steel.
Yeah.
I hope it doesn't go away. Right away, I thought of all the stories and all the things that we talk about, how someone could be at that prime age of their life, have everything in place when it comes to their financial security, and then goodness gracious, the rug's pulled out from underneath them.
Yeah, you lose that paycheck, and then all of a sudden you're scrambling to try to, make ends meet. And that's why I really wanted to make sure that we understood what it meant to have an emergency fund, because that term is thrown around there very loosely. And, an emergency fund isn't just nice to have. It's essential. And it's really for weathering storms without derailing your financial future. Now, it can be challenging for a 42-year-old that has kids to build up a significant emergency fund, because things are expensive today, and then they may get even more expensive, with these tariffs, and we may have some short-term pain. But having a well-established emergency fund is the cornerstone of any good financial plan. But I don't think we've really spent enough time considering what an appropriate amount looks like.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me to this question. So how many months' worth of expenses would you recommend our listeners set aside for their emergency fund?
Yeah, well, so here's the thing, and it's a good question, and it's we have to understand that we have to distinguish between essential and discretionary expenses. So essential expenses are simply food and shelter. What's it going to take me just to put food on the table and keep shelter over our head? Because at the end of the day, when things got really tough, that's all that matters. And all the discretionary expenses can go out the window. And those discretionary things are going to be like dining out and entertainment, your Netflix subscription, your gym membership, all those things. If you're married, your spouse getting their nails done, you might need to have your hair growing a little bit longer. But these are the sacrifices you got to make during those points in time, so you don't completely destroy any wealth that you've created. So, typically what you'll hear when it comes to the amount of time, you'll typically hear things like 3 to 6 months worth of savings. But I encourage people to really get out a pencil and paper and take out on that paper, just draw a line right down the middle of it. They said Ben Franklin used to do this all the time. And on one side, he would put the pros, and the other side, he'd put the cons. In this case, we're going to put your essential expenses and then your discretionary expenses. And all we want to do is add up those essential expenses. You know, again, that's going to be food and shelter is basically all that's going to come down to. And whatever that number is, you're going to want to do at least 6 months. Now, what I'm about to tell you has come from what we went through with COVID. After COVID, I personally started working very hard to get that cash reserve, especially the emergency cash reserve, up to at least 12 months. Now, that's not something you're going to be able to do overnight. That's a sacrifice that is going to be done over time. And it's very important that you consider doing that because we never know when things are going to happen. I mean, look at what's happening with UPS right now. I mean, you see, the UPS stocks have tumbled 40% over the last 3 years. And, the UPS alums are pissed. I mean, they've lost billions of dollars of their wealth. It's basically evaporated. And, it took a huge dive again on Thursday because Tomei, which is the CEO, she was actually I think the chief financial officer at Home Depot for a while, and she was on the board at UPS. And then during COVID, she was promoted to the CEO. But she announced that she wants to shrink their business with Amazon, and she wants to focus on a higher quality package delivery service rather than the volume. And obviously investors didn't like that. And you've got a lot of employees over the years that have taken compensation in the form of stock. And, this is why, you also have to be very careful you don't get overexposed in your company stock either. I mean, every publicly traded company typically will give their employees an opportunity to have, to take
piece of the action.
Yeah, piece of the action, right. But, you really, really shouldn't have any more than 10%, 15 max if you're really confident in your company. But, when you're with a company for 40 years, like some of these UPS employees were, I mean, you can see why they would believe in their company and want to accumulate a number of shares of that stock. So, but again, that ties back to having a plan. It ties back to making sure that emergency fund is taken care of first. And the two fundamental things that need to be handled before any investing can be done is the debts need to be paid down. Any major credit card debt needs to be paid off, especially high interest. And then you've got to work towards that emergency fund. And then once that's done, now you give yourself permission to start taking risk.
All right. Before we move on to our next question, Right Track Your Retirement. They'll send it to you. His book, he wrote it. Easy read, can be a life changer for you. It was for me. And more importantly, they'll pick up the shipping too. So you have everything to gain by getting this book, righttrackpittsburgh.com, Right Track Your Retirement. And to get the first in-office review absolutely free. They get right down to the matter of money because it matters to you. And within an hour, you'll know exactly where you stand. 800-656-8616, 800-656-8616. So just quickly, about 2 minutes to the break, Brian, are there specific life events or new sources of income like Social Security or pensions or annuities that should be factored into planning an emergency fund?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to anticipate any significant changes like marriage. Are you also all of a sudden going from just having to take care of yourself to having a new bride? The birth of a child, that's going to significantly change how much you need to have in emergency funds. Now, when it comes to income sources, if you have income sources like Social Security and pension and guaranteed income annuities, that can actually help you reduce the amount of money that you should be having in savings for emergency reserves. So if you've got guaranteed sources of income, and I'm not talking about like property, real estate property, because if you get a vacancy, right? If you get a vacancy, that's a problem. I had a client one time that, he commingled all of his money. I mean, he had his emergency cash reserves that he was funding his real estate properties out of, and before you knew it, he had a bunch of vacancies, and he was paying that mortgage and paying for repairs, and not realizing that he was dipping into his savings within that account, because he had it all commingled rather than separating it. So all of these things become factors. But again, Rob, that's why I wrote the book, Right Track Your Retirement. Go to righttrackpittsburgh.com, get a copy, and you can educate yourself on how to start building out a plan.
Back with more of Secure Money Advisors on the Money, and your host, Brian Quaranta, in a moment on KDKA.